How long do you feel like it took you to develop that kind of like? Would you say you have kind of a formula now for this piece of content's gonna go viral or this one's gonna do well? Like, would you say you have a formula for that?
Yeah, I can tell you what it is.
Oh, I'd love to hear it.
The formula is actually quite simple, and I think if you make short form content, whether you know that you do it or not, I think you figure it out eventually. But our formula for a viral short, which we sort of figured out pretty early on when shorts came out, was to have a visual hook and to have an audible hook at the beginning of every short. So, you're scrolling content, you only have, a few tenths of a second to grab somebody. And so that's true on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube. And so for us, it was like, what can we do that's visually immediately engaging? Like you're scrolling and boom, you get caught on Isaiah Photo's channel. Something that immediately grabs your attention visually, but also something audibly that I say that's like, hey, I'm going to do this thing. So we can't just, be pleasing to the eye. We also have to have like a message that we can deliver on at the end. So whatever I do say that I'm going to do, now I got to do it. So, having a viral concept is like having something that the mass audience is going to be interested in pretty much immediately. So every idea had to be that. And we've implemented in tons of different ways because, we have short form videos that are like kind of crack cocaine for kids, if you will. Like how many licks does it take to get to the center of a jawbreaker? I mean, even as an adult, I'm like, all right, tell me how many. Like, I got to see this video. And so we would film a video like that. But then we also have videos like I'm going to wear a pair of Crocs for a marathon. Not only did the long form piece of content work really well for that, but the short form did too. Because immediately if I'm holding up a pair of Crocs for a short and I'm like, today I'm going to run a marathon in Crocs and I'm at the Chicago Marathon, I think 90% of people are like, okay, yeah, I kind of want to see how that goes down.
That's so fascinating. So I'm curious, I've kind of learned this, I guess, through my own experience, but like, okay, it's a lot easier said than done to have yeah, you got the visual hook, you got the audio hook, but that can mean anything, right? Like, how do you determine this visual is going to hook people in, or this audio hook is gonna hook people in? Like, how do you what's your test for that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the visual hook is like a lot of times we use motion. So, if I'm holding the pair of Crocs, it's like coming away from the camera and then all of a sudden, or maybe I'm standing on a mountain, like something that's like immediately visually engaging, which is, it's like we're sort of playing with people's brains, right? Because you're like, I need to give you dopamine immediately. Yeah. So how can I do that? Something visual, even if you're an adult. I mean, kids, obviously, it's easier to do. But like, even if you're an adult, if you're doing something with motion, like all of a sudden you're like, oh, wow, so this thing's moving. So we would use motion quite a bit. Or I'd be like, we'd like spin the camera, something engaging in that way. And then the audio hook is really just me telling you something that's unbelievable. Because nobody believes that I'm going to lick a jawbreaker all the way to the center. You don't believe that. And so you're willing to stick around to see if I actually do it. Or like, I'm trying to think of other examples. I mean, there's a million of them.
I think one of my favorites I saw was how many tablespoons to fill up a bathtub.
Yes. Yeah, that has a lot of views. Or like, how long does a lighter last for? I think that has 94 million views. It's like, how long does a lighter last for? I click on that. So I'm saying that I want to find that answer and I'm clicking on the lighter. So you're seeing me immediately deliver on the promise of like, I want to know how many, or like with the bathtub, it's like, I have the tablespoon thing and immediately I'm dumping it in the bathtub. So I'm delivering on what I'm saying. So as a viewer, you're like, I can trust this guy and he's doing something that I just don't think he's going to, like, it sounds unbelievable.
Yeah.
And then you end up watching the whole video and you're like, wow, he actually did it. And that's the number. Well, that's kind of silly, but then at least I'm not like fooling people. Because if I didn't deliver, then I think you just end up with, it's clickbait for one.
Yeah.
And the audience is just going to be unsatisfied and probably not come back for another. You're going to get a ton of rage comments. So it's like there's strategy for sure.
How do you go about like the ideation process seems like probably the most important of all this, right? Mm-hmm. And maybe let's just stick with like the short form stuff. We can go into like thumbnails and titles later, but short form stuff, what's your process? Like, do you have a notes app in your phone of like, I don't know, you're out at the grocery store and you're like, oh, this is good, I should do this. Like, you just randomly think of an idea and write it down? Or do you guys have like brainstorm sessions, or what's this look like?
A little bit of both, I suppose. Like sometimes I am like I'll be walking or doing something. I'm like, oh, this is a good idea. I write it down. But a lot of times it's just me. I have 2 employees. So it's me. We do weekly meetings every Monday. And so we're on a call and, hey, we need 3 shorts this week. What kind of ideas do we have? And so many of these, if you go and look at my channel, so many of these ideas are copy and paste like ideas. So when we first started, it was like learning to do something. So I would learn to like throw knives or learn to break a brick with my bare hands or, anything that seemed difficult, I would try to do. And then it turned into how many. So our bucket was how many X to X. So it was like how many tablespoons to fill a bathtub, how many, how long does an air horn last for, how many licks to the center of a jawbreaker, which we then used for tons of different candies because we're like, oh, this is popped. How many other candies can we do? How many swipes of a Sharpie till it's empty? So a lot of like how many X to X was like a bucket, and then you can just copy and paste. All of a sudden you have 100 ideas. So I do think finding buckets that you can create within is really helpful. And if you have 2 or 3 of them, then you have infinite ideas that you can just keep like recycling through. Because people like familiarity. You think of like a TV show. Like, what's your favorite TV show?
Probably The Office.
The Office. It's like the same episode
Every
over
time.
and over again, right?
Yeah.
It's like, and you know what's going to happen. But that's what makes it so fun and you love it. And it's the same for every TV show. Seinfeld, like any sitcom is like the same episode. My wife and I are watching White Collar right now. Same episode over and over again. It's like there's nothing different. It's a formula. And that's what TV does really well. And I think if you're a good YouTuber, you probably do the same.
Interesting. Yeah, it's kind of like music too. Like pick any artist. Most of their songs sound so similar to one another. Like they have that distinct sound, but they're all different enough that it keeps you hooked and engaged. I guess that makes the same sense for YouTube content.
Yeah, we like familiarity.
Interesting. Yeah, I never thought about it that way because my creative brain is always like, how do I make this as different as possible so I'm not boring people? But I think people like the consistency and the familiarity. That makes sense.
It's the curse of like any sort of creative endeavor, I think. And I mean, I've noticed for myself is that desire to be different. And after a while, if you do the same thing, even if it's doing really, really well and you're getting 20 million views each video, you do eventually get burnt out from just doing the same thing. And then you're like, how do I get creative and change it? And oftentimes I have found that's when the views start to really dip. So it's like
when you start to change.
Yeah, when you start to change because people kind of just want to see the same thing, which is pretty weird.
That's so interesting. I've noticed that within my own content, without a doubt. Man, it's hard though as a creative to like keep just doing the same thing, even though it's working.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you combat that then?
Well, once you change a few times and and things go downhill, then you realize you're like, I should really just keep doing the same thing. But I do think it's just finding things that you like about it, probably, and like I think being a YouTuber is like the coolest job right now, and I love making videos. So it's like finding like, okay, I love making videos, so stop complaining. This is great. And it's not that I don't like the type of content that we make. I really do. And each era has been super fun to go through. But I do think you sort of change over time. Your interests change. And maybe you, like right now we're making a lot of running content. And so it's like things kind of shift a little bit. But like you said earlier, like a lot of our videos do still feel the same. So I do think like trying to bring the familiarity in, even if the title and the thumbnail are slightly different to what people might expect from us, still trying to keep like a very consistent theme. Like it's still the same Isaiah. He hasn't changed. It's not him sitting in a room necessarily talking, to a camera. It's still outside, still doing hard activities, those kind of things.